Well, these are not images from a disaster zone. These are actual scenes from the Ukrainian capital taken overnight. The pictures show protesters running amok, angry over plans for laws they say are aimed at punishing them for holding rallies. The response has been fierce, a mix of Molotov cocktails, clubs and firebombs, all thrown at police trying to stave off a revolution. Alexei Yaroshevsky is in Kiev for RT.
It's morning now in Kiev, but the tension at the right place where the events unraveled in a very violent manner yesterday are not dying down. You can see what remains of the police cars and police buses which were burnt yesterday, a pretty depicting picture of what happened here yesterday. Over there, just literally 50 meters away from here, are the police lines. The Pride police, the special regiment called the Berkut there, trying to secure the governmental border. Yesterday on Sunday, the protesters gathered for a typical rally. After that, they decided to storm the governmental border and the clashes with the police erupted. We have information that more than 70 police officers have been delivered to hospitals with different injuries. They still remain pretty much over there. We saw some very brutal scenes of the police officers being beaten up. Also, there was some violence from the police. Reportedly, they used rubber bullets against the crowds. We can see from time to time Molotov cocktails, rocks and flashbangs are being thrown from both sides towards each other. Over the night, the protesters have managed to dismantle some of the pavement here, and they're using these rocks to throw them at the police. They're also using Molotov cocktails and different flashbangs, so it's pretty loud here. This is the live barricade with the protesters against the police. They're still here. We can see like literally several thousand people. The numbers are expanding as the day progresses. Really unclear where this is all going to go, but so far it's been very, very tense. The word on the ground is that the police may actually try to assault the barricade on the Independence Square, which has been there for almost 2 months now, and this may end in very violent scenario. Just to give you the idea of how serious this whole thing is here, the protesters are installing a catapult, a medieval weapon, to make sure their projectiles, Molotov cocktails, rocks are actually be able to reach the police lines, which are literally 80 meters away from here. We also do know that President Yanukovych has met with some opposition leaders and he's ready to hold negotiations with the opposition, but this is not the talk of the town right here. The people are still very much determined for the government to resign, for the president to step down. This is their goal. This is no longer a pro-EU protest, which it was at the beginning of this whole protest story in Kiev. This is a purely anti-governmental movement. We are certainly following all the developments of what's happening in the Ukrainian capital, Kiev.
Well, these are pictures of the aftermath of the battle between activists and police. As people gather en masse in central Kiev, the Interior Ministry warns that the opposition is now arming protesters with clubs. Now, despite the fallout from last night's clashes, there remains the potential violence that could indeed be sparked again. Well, dozens of policemen remain hospitalized in Kiev with head injuries, fractures and poisoning by unknown substances. The president has called for dialogue to prevent further violence. But despite this, the EU is sticking to its position of blaming the local authorities. And as Elena Galushka reported, it appears the scene is being set for the final act.
As rocks went flying and police buses went up in flames, the opposition leaders very quickly found the men responsible for the mayhem. Ukraine's President Viktor Yanukovych.
We demand that you stop the escalation of the situation, get the police off the streets, dissolve the parliament and call for early parliamentary and presidential elections. Do not repeat the fate of Ceausescu and Gaddafi.
The fact that the riots were started by several hundred protesters hailing from the ultra-nationalist camp on the Independence Square seems to have been swept under the carpet. The police had to withstand a shower of rocks and Molotov cocktails. The government, an avalanche of criticism for using water cannons and rubber bullets to contain the raging crowd.
The increasing tension in Ukraine is a direct consequence of the government failing to acknowledge the legitimate grievances of its people. The US will continue to consider additional steps, including sanctions, in response to the use of violence.
And though the protest leaders and members chanted revolution much of the night, the West seemed indifferent for the open calls for a coup.
Under these conditions, we don't want to live, we don't want to work. That's why we're going to change the power.
The score is symptomatic. 70 policemen were injured, 20 protesters arrested. Cameras captured the scenes of the rioters' vicious attacks against the security forces. Yet, for the Western leaders and for the Ukrainian opposition, this seems to be the European way to solve Ukraine's internal political issues.
We have European values, we have European principles, we have European rights that we must uphold in each and every European country.
This type of pressure seems to be effective. Not even 24 hours after the riots started, President Yanukovych has already made concessions to the opposition, going as far as meeting with Klitschko. And backed by the rampaging mob in Independence Square, the Ukrainian opposition seems to be in a win-win situation, either by getting a change of leadership by force or simply forcing early elections. But with radical spirits now well and truly spilled in Kiev, the question is, would the opposition be capable of getting it back in the bottle? Irina Galushko.